Hi, I'm Jamie Bleakley. I am an occupational therapist,
I'm Crystal Vermeyer, also an occupational therapist.
and together with our husbands, we are the co owners of a Better Tomorrow Therapy and Wellness Center, LLC, here in Anchorage, Alaska. We are a clinic that does occupational, physical, and speech therapy. And we had sat down and asked our staff kind of some of their questions and topics for our podcast. And one of them that came up was discussing the difference between functional versus mastery and how that works into writing our goals and skill sets and when deciding discharge is okay.
Yeah. And I think for me, starting at the very beginning, discharge is always like front of mind. Like, what does it look like to be done? Like, what is from meeting the families and talking with the parents, it's what can I best serve you with? Like, what would make the biggest difference in your life right now is usually somehow close to how I phrase that. And then also, like, what does it look like to be done? What does it look like to have either a break or not need feel like you not need the support and the services anymore. And then we kind of revisit that throughout too. And it depends on why I'm seeing them and what they're there for. I mean, if it's a little infant and we're doing feeding stuff, pretty much every week we talk about, okay, how did this week go? What went well? What didn't go well? This was your very first week, what would your biggest concern be? Like kind of bringing that question back in. So it's a big process with the families for me of just collaboration between what do you need me to be working on? And here's what I'm seeing, and let's see how that meshes together. And sometimes what I'm seeing and the things that I know developmentally aren't super important to the family. And then it's like, okay, well, cool. Like, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to help support you. And like, unless that ties into the direction you want to be heading, then we can kind of just let that go. And I think that's part of that like functional versus mastery too, is especially for like new grads coming in, they have a harder time letting go of their therapy opinion of like, but they're behind on this and they need this, and they need this. And they're not wrong. Like, yeah, they need all those supports and they're not getting all those milestones, but that's not super important to the families right now. So let's focus more on what is important. And sometimes you have to hit a certain milestone or you have to hit something that's not maybe not on the parent's highest agenda. But then how do we communicate that with the families and support them to understand like, here's the path and here's how I have to like how I know how to get there. So we become like the GPS of it a little bit.
That's fair. I would say one of my questions too, especially for the older kids that come in, is why now? So, like
Yes.
when families come in when their kids 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or older, a lot of the behavior, the regulation, the different things have been there for years. So I can get a lot of good information by just asking the family, okay, so why are you seeking services
Yeah.
now? And that helps me guide too, because like I can look at a kid who's 7, 8, 9 and only eats chicken nuggets and peanut butter jelly sandwich with just Wonder Bread, like only specific foods. And the parents are like, oh no, we're fine though. We're picky eaters too. Like, whatever's.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. And I'm like, the inner side of me is like, where are your vegetables?
Where's all your you
Why
don't have
aren't you
balanced
eating
nutrition?
fruit? Yeah.
We talk about that. Like I will in those instances, I do talk about like, okay, finding ways to balance out so you get proper nutrition because malnutrition does lead to behaviors and all the different things. But I'm other than like some education around some basic nutrition concepts and like helping them broaden that just a little bit or at least broaden their thinking on it, like that's not their primary focus. Like we're not gonna stay there, but
Yeah. Or we'll have other people that like I've had therapists like really upset, like, co-sleeping is a big thing that comes up and like therapists with no kids,
all the
out of
ideas of how to be
school.
the best
Oh
parent
yeah, they're
ever.
gonna be wonderful parents, come out with like, I will never co-sleep and this is terrible. They should be sleeping in their own bed. Does it matter? Like if the child is safe, like yes,
There's safety
yeah,
precautions
there's
and there's
safety
support.
precautions, there's recommendations. But if that kid is safe, why does it matter? And for years,
I was say
co-sleeping was fine
that historically through all of time, that was how sleeping
and
happened
culturally.
culturally. There was a lot of co-sleeping. There was a lot of held, like strapped to the body sleeping because, hunter gatherer times you had to be on the move. And so that was just required. And some of that stuff is still really good. Like there's a lot of bonding that comes with that. There's a lot of connection and support and attunement and quite frankly, convenience. If you're breastfeeding, sometimes it's just better to sleep naked and have, opportunity to just be, let's do this instead of not. And there's ways to do that that's safe. And, there's little side bassinets you can get. There's lots of different ways to do it. And safety is important. But our personal judgment and bias on that shouldn't factor into our ability to support a family in their decisions and what's culturally good for their family beyond the safety.
So I think that starting there, like at initial eval, we should be looking at what does discharge look like? Like where are we headed? And that doesn't mean our end goal isn't going to move along the way. Cause I'd say once we establish a relationship, sometimes the parents will see us hit one milestone and they're like, oh yeah, by the way,
Yeah.
there's also X, Y, and Z. So sometimes it's just building that trust and relationship to begin with before they're going to give you the big hairy
Yeah, sometimes you get
ugly.
layers of learning that happen over time. And that does come with relationship and rapport. I think there's a lot of families that I've been seeing for a year or months and years, and randomly they'll throw something out. And I was like, how long has this been a concern? They're like, oh, forever. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's move on. Let's address this. Let's work forward. And it would have been nice to know that ahead of time. But you know things in the timeline that you're supposed to, and that
Yeah.
it feels comfortable for everybody. Um, but I think as a therapist, I have seasoned professional wisdom to know that. And as a new grad coming out, a lot of them are like, how come you got this information? How come I can't get them to tell me these things? Why didn't they tell me this before now? And so it's kind of just some of it is building the comfort in newer therapists to understand that things do take time, and that's normal for everybody. And even, there are certain things that people are going to be more comfortable with us because we just build that comfort faster because of the experience and the repetitions of doing that over time with lots of different people and families. Um,
There's some nuances to learning the interview process of being able to ask questions in a non-judgmental manner too, and how to throw it out. Like, because as a therapist, if I'm awkward about it and if I'm making it uncomfortable, that parent's not going to be open and honest with me about what's going on inside their home.
and there's a difference between a transactional, going through your checklist of information and having a conversation about it. And it doesn't mean that I don't have a checklist. Like, I very much have a mental checklist. I used to have a physical checklist that I also just guided my note taking process. And the same thing with our interviews to have staff. We have a guided process, but the whole process is about a conversation. Because in that regard, we need to be able to converse one with one another to have that employee employer relationship. But the same thing with your families to have good communication and be able to explain home programs, and them to have buy in and them to feel safe and comfortable to tell us the things that are not working, or tell us that they tried the thing that we asked them to do that went so well in the clinic and it was a complete failure flop at the house. To have that safety, to have that conversation, we need to be able to converse back and forth, and we need to have that feel very transformational and connected, and that relationship matters, and not just be clinical checklist. Here is another clinician, another medical professional that's just getting their information, doing their job, and moving on,
But telling me what to do
or telling
without
me what to do.
understanding
Taking
family
that from me.
dynamics.
And I've had a lot of families that they've just kind of submitted to that too. Like, oh, just tell me what to do. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Bring you back into the process. We're going to practice this here, because then you can have that autonomy out and about. But you are the parent. You are the one that gets the say. And if you don't want the services, the knowledge, the tools that I'm providing, you need to be able to tell me that so that we can adjust the plan, so we can change it. If that's not going to work for you and your family, I need to know that ideally sooner rather than later, so I can help you adjust and find something that does work.
Yeah, as part of my interview process, I also like at the end, I will ask families what their goals are. Like, give me 2 to 3 to 4 of the most important things. Like, if what would make the biggest difference in your home. And then I also give them permission. We're not always going to mesh. If something is not working, please let us know and we can discuss it. We can change directions on that, but also let us know what is working well. So I try to set that culture from the beginning too, that this is a partnership. This is not me telling you how to raise your kid, because I don't know your kid
And I don't know
anywhere
your life. I
near.
don't know your daily story
Yep.
and what's real and what's not. And
And I don't know your history. Giving that family that power to be able to share their stories, to be able to tell you, you know what, we tried this at home and it was stupid.
We talk about being on the same team. Like
Or
we're a team together.
nobody got time for that. I'm not doing it.
And
Is okay too.
I've had some newer grad therapists like come out, and I've worked with them in different settings, and literally say, and this just like irritated me to my core, of if these parents love their kids, they do this whole
Oh,
program. And I'm like, oh no, like these parents do love their kids, but you don't know what it's like to have one kid, let alone four, and three of them have special needs and separate appointments and all these different things that are going on. Let's take the judgment back for a second and let's back this home program down to something that they can manage, because I wouldn't be able to do that. And I have two kids that are fairly well functioning at the time. Like this was years ago in a last like setting that I was in. But yeah,
oh,
that's
yeah,
never what you
no.
want to hear. And so it's, you know, we want to support and empower.
No, I think that goes into home programs too. Like I always like I give families ideas of what to do at home. I try to encourage that like I model in the session and then like here try this at home. But I always try to make it something functional that their kids can do together. Like if they have
Yeah.
multiple children, make it a family game or make it something or tie it into a routine they're doing already.
That was suggestion is routines. Like
You
a
know,
lot of
getting ready for bedtime, we can do animal walks down the hall. We can do yoga as part of our bedtime routine, bath routines, like tie it into, you know, for our littles during diaper changes, do this stretch, and it should not take more than a couple
yeah.
minutes. Like,
Well, and like I do a lot of oral motor mouth work with like my infants that I do feeding with, or even some of my bigger kids. And so it's like, okay, before you eat, can you, if they're not super distressed or they're not super hungry, like, and I also give them lots of outs too. Like, if they're really hungry, don't feel like you need to do this, even though it makes their feeding better. Like, that's okay. Sometimes you just need to focus on feeding, and then you can focus on the therapeutic growth aspect of it at different times. And it's okay for some feedings to be just feedings and some feedings to be more therapeutic. And, tying it into time and all of that is really helpful. And knowing how they take information best. Like some of my families, they just want it on a sticky so they can go home and they can have something they can look at. Some of my families, just a quick verbal exchange is great. And some need like a written out home program and they'll do that. Some you hand them a written home program and they're like, that's going to be lost in the back of my car. And they don't know why it's there. And we'll find it months later when I finally clean my car. So it's like being able to have that relationship and rapport with your family is also ties into like that follow through piece at home. Some people just, that's they just they have a lot going on, and I acknowledge that as a therapist and as a parent and as a real life human. But I also will give them little tips and tricks and support, and then I grade how much I give based on how much they can receive and how much time they have or what they're asking for in support. So I try to match my level of support outside of the clinic sessions to where they're at.
and I would say our kids that autism spectrum, they're going to have things to work on throughout their lifespan. Our kids with congenital issues, they're going to have things to work on throughout their lifespan.
Yeah.
Our kids that have alcohol or drug exposure or trauma, therapy could go on forever. But again, as a family, it's not sustainable. There's burnout. Sometimes it's time to take a break,
Or switch therapists.
switch therapists.
Sometimes the parents have a harder time with breaks and therapist switches than the kid would. So that's a factor that you have to factor in.
The number of times our parents come in and like they don't do well with new people. No, and it's you that doesn't do well with new people. The kids, especially the way our clinic is set up, the kids know everybody in there. We are familiar faces.
We're all treating
We've
in shared space a lot of the time.
yeah, we've treated around them and interacted with them with whoever we're working with. So like the kids are typically really good at being able to switch from therapist to therapist. It makes the parents nervous and
And
fair.
sometimes rightfully
Fair,
so.
yeah.
Some of their transitions have not gone really well in the past. They've had to change daycares because they're one of the kids that had behavior issues, and it didn't go well at the new daycare because nobody knew their kid. And, you know, they get babysitters quitting on them all the time because their kids are hard. And so sometimes they have their own traumas and their own background and history that supports why they're scared and nervous about transitions and new people. And that comes back to like our ability to support them. And hopefully we're able to manage that. But um,
And a lot of times what I'll share with parents too is like we it's nice to have a fresh set of eyes
yes.
to kind of come in because sometimes we get too comfortable, both on the kid's side with the therapist and the therapist side with the kid, that we think, they're making such great gains, and from where they came from, they're looking so good that we may be missing things along the way. But
Or
also,
make unconscious assumptions, like they're not ready to do that yet, or we don't want to
oh,
challenge them because it's going to be hard. And then somebody else comes in and challenges them in a different way. And you're like, that's not going to, oh my gosh, it worked. You're like, great, that's fantastic. And then you have to check yourself. Like I've had that happen over the years too, where it's just like, oh, cool. You are ready for some different things. And maybe I should have pushed you a little bit sooner. And so not getting stuck in that guilt as a therapist either or a parent, but embracing that like this was a great opportunity to learn new things. I think it's great when people can see my kids and tell me like the cool things that they're doing. And then I could be like, cool, let's level up. Let's do this harder thing.
and I'd say too, like, we're not always going to have the same lunch lady at school. We're going to have substitute bus drivers. We're going to have
Teachers.
substitute teachers. You know, new school years, everything changes.
Yep.
So giving our kids a safe place to do those transitions, even if it doesn't go well, we're trained to deal with that
Hmm.
not going well. So giving those kids that opportunity to have their big feelings, to have their shutdowns and kind of see what that looks like and see what works to get them regulated again, because
That's
they're
part of
going
the
to have
process.
changes in life. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of it all. It's all these opportunities for like rupture and repair. This, like, things didn't go well. Cool. Now what do we do about it? How do we co regulate and support and come together to problem solve? Now what? And that I think is really important too for them to have those less positive rupture experiences with like not what we're providing them, but we're like, that's how it went down. And then we were supported through it. So were able to layer positivity on hard times so that we can manage those big feelings and those frustrations and have some in the back of our head thinking, like, oh, the last time I was this frustrated and this upset, they helped me and I'm not alone. And this isn't as overwhelming. And so that we can start to build in that too. Like there's a lot of opportunity there. And then I think moving forward, like when we talk like reavals and the functional versus mastery of goals, when we're trying to like come up with new goals or decide whether this goal still fits or we need something else, for me that starts also at the beginning of like I write my goals less than what I can expect in the time frame of the plan of care. So we have plans of care that we get signed by the doctor. It's our plan, it's our treatment protocol, what we're going to do with the goals that we're working on. And for here in Alaska, like we go with under 3 years of age is every 6 months, and over 3 years is every 12 months. And then we can do them a little bit sooner if they're meeting goals and that is necessary and becomes apparent. But I always write my goals smaller because I want something that I can hit, a target that we can try to hit in that time frame so that we can have like micro milestones for those kids that are going to be in it for a long time and those kids that are going to make really slow progress, and that's okay. That's their developmental trajectory. And so we need to break our goals down to being focused on function and focused on relatively reasonably attainable skills in the time frame that we have. That helps to break down those micro milestones for us, for the children, for the insurance companies that are going to pay, for the parents. Um, and that has really, like, as I've changed my goal rating process over the years from being like they should be at this level to being like, okay, what do we think we can maybe achieve in this time frame on the way to a final destination? That has helped me a lot in the process, and I've shared that a lot with a lot of the newer grads that I've mentored and supported too. Is we come out with some really big ideas, especially right out of school, of like these are the things that they need to do this and they need to like hit all these milestones, and they do over time. But what do we think we can actually do in the time frame that we have? And so being able to break it down, even though that might still be 3 years developmentally away from where they are chronologically, that's okay because that's a gain from where they are. And I think thinking about measuring, there's a book called The Gap in the Gain that I really enjoy, but the idea of measuring from the gain of where you started to where you're going versus I started at point A, I wanted to get to point C, but I only got to point B. And you're looking at that distance between B and C, that gap between where you are and where you could have ideally been, and you get stuck in that ideal gap space. That's not good for anybody. So being able to back it up a little bit, and even if that means I'm doing my reevals a little bit sooner, I'd much rather do that. And then we show progress and we move things forward. I love when I get to a reeval and I can look at all the things that I like read the last one that I did. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, this used to be so hard. Like, look at all the things that you can do now. Like, we celebrate that. I celebrate that with the kids, even when they're teeny tiny and they may not understand what I'm saying. Like, I want to show joy and celebration. And then I do the same thing with the parents. Like, do you remember how hard this, it was to be able to crawl and how much we were working on that way back when? And now we're doing X, Y, and Z. Just like helping to celebrate those milestones. Cause sometimes if kids are delayed, sometimes people aren't celebrating the progress that is being made because it's still in that gap space of they're not where they should be. And so being able to be the one that's excited sometimes just reignites that in the parent of like, oh my gosh, yes. Or sometimes they're like great and they're super excited and they celebrate all the little wins and stuff. So they're just happy to be there alongside you. But there are also parents that get lost in that, like my kid is so far behind. And that's there's a lot of emotion involved in that. And I honor that and I respect that. But I also want to bring you into the like, but look at all the things they can do because even the most challenging, delayed, struggling, you know, child that I've worked with, they make progress.
Mhm.
They make lots of good progress. Sometimes it's just little bits at a time. And I talk about, like my 19, almost 20-year-old that I'm seeing at this point that I've known since she's 4. I talk with her mom all the time. We talk about she's just developing on her own timeline. Like she's still learning skills that people would at this point, she's 19. Other clinics would have said, "You're over 18. Sorry, bye." She's still making progress. It's slow. It's a lot of repetitions. There were some health concerns, so there were some delays that went with that. So now we had to regain skills, and now we're in that going forward again stage. But she still blows me away with all the cool things that she's like. I'm like, wait, you're doing that now? Look at you go. Like, that's amazing. Or sometimes she'll get stuck in her head. She's like, I can't. This week was a very I can't week. I was like, you said I can't a lot. She's like, yeah. I was like, but did you do it? She's like, yeah. It's like, can you stop saying I can't? And so, like, again, that rapport in the relationship allows us to have those very candid conversations. But, we're working on, we're not necessarily mastering things, but we're working on advancing functional skills. And I think it's more important to be functional than to have mastery. I think that's where I come back
Yep.
to that is like, we want to be functional and we want to be as high as like we want to achieve high functionality, but like what is mastery? Like emotional regulation, you're never going to master that. Like somebody cuts you off in traffic, you're probably going to lose your mind. Somebody yells at you outside of the office, you're going to lose your mind. Like you're going to have a moment where you just completely dysregulate and you have to figure that out again.
Yeah. And I'd say Marty Smith, she wrote The Connected Therapist, and she's an occupational therapist out of Texas. And one of the things she throws out there specifically for sensory integration and regulation is the second date principle.
Mhm.
Like, would this prevent you from getting a second date? Like somebody who only orders chicken nuggets and french fries because they don't want to use their fork. Like it's going in their body, it's their food. Like, would that prevent a second date? Probably not. So, looking at that, like somebody who has various tics or various little quirks to them, probably not going to prevent you from being friends with them. Or, however, if this person is coming up and sniffing your toes on a regular basis, that's probably
Yeah, that's right.
a deal breaker. So, looking at that when we're looking at that functional versus mastery, too,
Mhm.
again, like mastery is like 80% or better. We may or may not get there for some things, but for different kids, like they may be functional. Like if we can get them that they're able to hold a job by doing X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
does that mean they're going to college? Maybe, maybe not.
And people have different life
Yeah.
trajectories too. Like the options of where we get to in adulthood and the transition since we work with peds is widely varied. And just because a child who is 2 and 3 and nonverbal and having a lot of behavior issues and all sorts of chaos, for lack of a better word, in their early development does not mean that they're not going to be a fully functional, albeit maybe a little weird because we're all a little weird, unbirthed society. And so it's finding that right balance of like, I'm going to support you in whatever that looks like. And as we approach different milestones and different ages, we need to discuss like realistic options. Like my 19-year-old friend is never going to be living on her own. That's just not developmentally where she's going to get, but she's going to continue to build functional skills to be as independent as possible within the caregivers of her family that's going to take care of her over time.
And I'd say I had a kiddo who was going into high school and he probably was on the autism spectrum, just not diagnosed, but had little red flags and quirks along the way, like from the time he was 2, 3, like didn't speak until he was like 5 or 6, like little things along the way, and had services. But we worked, I mean, one of his goals was embrace your uniqueness.
Yeah.
Find your people. Like, was he ever going to fit in with the jocks of the world? No, he didn't have the coordination for that, and he didn't have the interest in it. Like, it wasn't. But as he went into high school, he was able to find those other kids that were into the same interest as him, and
Mhm.
like that's pretty much as adults what we're looking for.
Yep.
Like, find your people, find your joy, find what's going to make you happy. And like was super fun to watch him kind of come through that of like, I'm bullied, I'm picked on, like these people are awful to me. And I'm like, well, who's the awful person in this scenario? So being able to look at everybody's differences and who's being the best them, who's being kind to each other, who's being the most accepting, and finding that uniqueness and finding other people that share that with you.
Yeah. Because I'm a stone cold weirdo, but we're really good friends. Like, and I have a lot of really cool people that I know that are like, we all are quirky and we're all a little weird. And it's like
And we're all
helping
on the spectrum
it's
somewhere.
helping to embrace that. Like, it's so they called you weird. Like, are you a little different than everybody? Like, I've had that conversation with one of my older kids. He was upset because some kids at school had called him weird. And I was like, do you, did, is that weird for what is expected? And he's like, well, I guess so. So were they wrong? And he's like, no. It's like they could have been kinder about it. Like, and so we talked through the like embrace the weird, embrace the uniqueness, and, like own who you are as a human, and that builds your resilience and makes you less of a victim and more of a like agent of change in your own life. And that's what I want for the kiddos that are like, as much as they can, be an agent for your own life and be in charge of as much as you can and find that functionality to find your place. And that might be very different for every different person, but that's life. Like, everybody's place is different
And
and we're
skill
all
sets are
struggling.
gonna be different,
Yeah.
and yeah, like, some of us are really good at, constructional stuff, and other, like, don't wanna touch a power tool. Like, so we all have different skills, and I think that's where it comes into, like, we don't need to master everything.
Mhm.
It's unrealistic to think we're gonna master
Yeah.
everything,
No.
but we can be functional to be in the life that we're in.
And I think for us looking at it from birth through into adulthood, it's really highlighting for the therapists that work with us, for the families, for community, like when we're talking about and collaborating, is what does functional look like right now? And what does functional look like as we're going forward? We may not know what that trajectory is, but we can't lose sight of, we can't just look at the now and like where we've come. We also have to keep in mind where we're going, not to have that gap of like we're not there yet, but like to know what that trajectory is. Because some people it is looking for vocational programs. Some people it's like finding them into college and all of the like advanced learning and all the different things because that's where they're going to go and that's their thriving. And some is community living or supportive family homes and things like that. So not getting stuck on the future, but being aware of it and not ignoring it either is really important. But staying most focused in the now.
And respecting the families, and when they're saying, like,
Mhm.
"You know what? I think we're doing really well right now. Can we take a break?" Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So keeping that in mind too, and respecting like the where the families are in their life,
Mm.
how things are looking in the home. A lot of times we'll see like Christmas breaks or when the family goes on vacation, they'll come back and like the kid will have all these new skills. And sometimes it's just they had time to process
Yeah.
it and practice in their home environment where it was safer. And so
And that's really important because that's I mean, that's life too. Like we don't work 24/7 like every day on like day after day on stuff. We take vacations, we take breaks. We like that's just a natural part of it. And for those kiddos that this is a long term, they're going to need support in their development. It's okay to say like, what if we just took the summer off? What if we just took these little bit of time off? Or like, you know, they have a lot going on, or you just had a new baby. Maybe it's a time to just take a little bit of a break. Like all these have been real conversations that we've had over the years. Like I've had to give a parent permission one time to like, girl, you can go get your hair done. Like, it's okay. She's like, I haven't had my hair done in like this however long and like all this stuff because her kid was pretty high needs. He needed a lot of stuff going on. I believe he had Down syndrome amongst other things as his diagnoses. But I was like, he had a very involved father that was more than capable. But mom took it on herself and took that mom guilt of like, I need to be the one and I need to do all this and stuff. And I was like, girl, I've met your husband. Like, just say I need a break and I need a couple hours to myself and go get yourself some lunch with a girlfriend and get your hair done. And she like we talked about it while we were doing therapy and doing the different stuff. And then she came back the next week. She's like, I am so glad that you told me to do that because it was such a game changer, just that like couple hours to be able to. I think she ended up going to lunch with her friend and got her hair actually cut and done nice. And so, like, sometimes you just
To recharge.
need a recharge,
Yeah.
and that's important too. Because as much as our work is about the kids, it's also about the families that they live in. Our goals are around the children, but families are part of that, especially when you're working with kids more so than any other setting.
Yeah. So summary is mastery is not realistic in most cases, but we are looking for everybody to be the most functional them
Mhm.
and being able to function in their home, their community, and their outside settings.
Yeah, and I'd say if you're a therapist, like it's okay to like get to a reeval and say, you know what, we didn't meet that goal, but we're not going to. I'm just going to discharge that goal, and like here's a comment on the progress that we made, but I'm done with that one, and that's okay. Like it's okay to just say, you know what, that's not the direction we're heading in anymore. We've worked towards it, but we're not quite getting there, and we're not on the path to get there, and it's no longer a priority. It's okay to switch gears and look at where are you at right now with your client, and how do they like what do they need and how can you support them? I just like, cut some goals sometimes. I'm just like, yep, done with that one. Or sometimes I just reword them to something different. I'm like, this no longer fits exactly what I'm trying to say and like what we're trying to accomplish. So just give you permission.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Hit the share, like, subscribe button, and please leave some comments. Thank
Thank
you.